They will get the top of you. Move, 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 moving up and down again. There's no discharge in the wall. Rise, to think of something different. Oh, my God, keep me from going lunatic. Moving up and down again. There's no discharge in the wall. 7, 6, 7, 5, 4, 3, 2, 4.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Renegade Marquee on the Renegade Pop Culture Podcast Network. My name is Mike. I'll be your host this evening. Joining me is the Super Saiyan death metal god himself, Nick.
A man walks into a bar with a giraffe. They both get pissed. The giraffe falls over. The man goes to leave and the bartender says, "Oi, you can't leave that lion there." And the man says, "No, it's not a lion. It's a giraffe."
At least Nick's not utterly humorless.
We had to get a reference in from the first movie. This movie that we're talking about does no nostalgia callbacks, so somebody had to.
Yeah, so we are talking about 28 years later. One of my most anticipated movies of, I would say the summer, but frankly, the year.
Yeah, especially after how good those trailers were. This is probably the best marketing campaign for a movie that just did not reveal anything.
Oh, 100% agreed.
But I guess in the meantime, we might as well just go back and talk about the previous two movies, because this is where I voice my annoyance at everybody calling everything a franchise. You can't call two movies a franchise.
Yeah, this is, at best, we could call this a series.
I always just refer to everything as a series anyways, just because I'm picky like that. But we might as well just end up talking about one of the greatest movies of all time, and I never thought in a million years we'd actually get to talk about the original 28 Days Later.
Can I just start by saying how jealous I am that you actually got to see it in theaters for your first time?
Yeah, so context for everybody. The hype leading up to 28 Years Later, last month, they showed 28 Days Later to build up the hype machine for this movie. And the fact that the Blu-ray had gone out of print over the course of COVID, this is one of the things you can actively blame Disney for and criticize them rightfully over. But it was honestly just great to see this in a theater with a crowd of people who were as excited for the next movie as I was. Mike, do you remember the first time you would have watched 28 Days Later?
I'll be completely honest. I've only just seen it for the first time the week preparing for this new one.
I'm low-key kind of judging you for that, because I strongly think that the original Dawn of the Dead and this are like two of the most important zombie movies ever made. Just to go through the entire impact that this movie had, like, we wouldn't have had things like Zack Snyder's remake of Dawn of the Dead with the Wreck 1 and 2. We're not going to count 3 and 4, but Wreck 1 and 2 are masterpieces. But those movies basically would not exist if it wasn't for 28 Days Later's influence and impact. I mean, the first time I saw it, I think I would have been either in ninth or just gotten into 10th grade. And I think it would have been one of the first R-rated DVDs I picked up back in the day.
That actually is a good first DVD to pick up for like an R-rated movie.
And honestly, considering how, spoiler alert for this one, given how violent 28 Years Later is, it is pretty newcomer friendly for newer horror fans to get into. It's not super gory and doesn't really have a lot of gross out moments. But I also said this to you, and I kind of picked up on this on the rewatch when I went to go see it in the theater. I'm going to quote Irvin Kershner describing Empire Strikes Back. Well, paraphrase him is more like it. It's that there were laughs, but there weren't gags. Basically, that there were moments that were subtly funny, but they didn't take away from the serious tone of the movie.
I think that's actually pretty accurate.
Like a lot of the stuff with Jim and Celine meeting up with Frank and Hannah, going through the entire grocery store sequence, that got some pretty solid laughs when Hannah is dressed up with Celine with the awful rapist soldiers at the end of the movie. She's just making jokes about how they're going to die the entire time. That got some good laughs out of the theater. The part where the zombie actually does pop up behind the soldier and just attacks them in the house, that I kind of couldn't help but go, like, is this supposed to offset how terrifying this is supposed to be?
That's what it seems like, because just knowing Danny Boyle outside of the movies he's directed, like watching him in interviews and stuff, he definitely has a cheeky sense of humor.
And also, let's just bring up how good all of these actors are. I mean, this movie basically launched Cillian Murphy's career.
Yeah.
Like this, just pulling the Wikipedia page up right now, and I even checked it shortly after seeing this movie. It was that Christopher Nolan cast him as Scarecrow in Batman Begins because he was so impressed by his acting in 28 Days Later. And like, he's amazing in it, and this was probably one of the first times an actor being in a horror movie surprised me, was that I was a big Harry Potter fan growing up, and seeing Brendan Gleeson, who was Mad-Eye Moody in those movies, him showing up in this, I was like, holy shit, Mad-Eye Moody's in this? What?
Oh, and here's the funniest part. I told Nick this off air, but the eye that gets infected is the exact same eye that Mad-Eye Moody has.
Yeah, I never picked up on that after all of these years, and I don't know why. I mean, even Christopher Eccleston is great in this. Everybody in this movie really does turn in. You could make the argument that Hannah's actor isn't the best, but she's also a kid actor. I know that some people would be like, oh, that's no excuse, just especially spoiler alert, because of how good 28 years later is. But honestly, even her, I find myself giving a pass. I think the only major flaw, and I bring this up to Mike a lot when we talk about movies coming out on 4K, not every movie needs to be released out on 4K. And 28 Days Later is proof of that, as it's well documented that this was shot on basically what was a home video camera, just kind of rigged up and ready, which was a genius idea to get like iconic scenes like Cillian Murphy walking through abandoned London trying to find people after he wakes up from his coma. I understand the motivation for wanting to use current technology to make your movie, especially to make it that quick.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, though, using these old tapes and having it look as degraded as it does, even on Blu-ray, it shows its age. And I think it'll only kind of look worse as like modern TVs and modern technology in terms of 4K get better and better. I honestly, just given that Sony now owns the rights to 28 Days Later, I would be okay with just a Blu-ray.
Yeah, I think a Blu-ray does this movie just fine.
Well, I would even be okay with like new artwork, new special features, but no, even the theater re-release that I saw, it looked about as good as the Blu-ray did, so I would be fine if it was just the Blu-ray.
Same.
But this is where we start to deviate a little bit, because only 5 years later, which is a bit of a long time between sequels, we got 28 weeks later. And Mike, do we want to tear the Band-Aid off and piss everybody off, or do we want to just kind of lead in with some of the positives first?
I think the best way to approach this is to lead off with the positives, because the opening sequence of 28 Weeks Later is genuinely incredible.
Oh, exactly. It establishes the characters immediately. You understand, given the previous movie, that they're in the middle of this outbreak of zombies, which, just a little bit of an anecdote, these are zombie movies. Let's just be honest. I don't understand the whole trying to cherry pick and split hairs over if this is a zombie movie or an infection movie. Let's just be honest. These people are pretty much basically dead. I understand that they're infected with rage and not dead, but they basically act the same as zombies. They act on impulse. Their sole purpose is to spread the disease, basically. But no, I'm there with you, dude. It establishes the characters right then and there. You understand the motivation for hiding. It is kind of genius that they just set it in pitch black. You can't see anything. You don't know if it's day or night outside. You just know that these people have been in this house for a very long goddamn time. And of course, somebody has to be the dumbass that brings the kid into the house, not knowing what's coming.
Of course. When they open that door for the first time, it is a bit shocking, like, oh, okay, so it's daytime. But then you realize this is the first of many dumb mistakes that these characters make.
More on that in a minute. But nonetheless, like, this is excusable. So, as soon as the infected, though, start showing up, there's a lot of really good tension. There's a lot of really good moments. Like, I understand some people do love to debate if Don should have gone back for his wife, but let's just be honest. If we were all in that situation, she is across the room with this kid, and there's at least 2 or 3 zombies in the room with them. There's no going back to save her, especially knowing that pretty much this entire house gets devoured instantly.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And let's just be honest, that one panning shot over the hills, just seeing countless numbers of zombies chasing after him, you're immediately gonna make me go, fuck yeah, that's cool.
It's almost like the zombie equivalent of the stampede scene from The Lion King.
Pretty much, good comparison. But I guess with all of that out of the way, Mike, care if I do my tearing of the Band-Aid off?
Go ahead.
Band-Aid torn off. 28 weeks later kind of sucks.
Especially when compared to the first one.
Well, here's my entire thing. So, like, I'll continue with a few more positives. I do like Rose Byrne and Jeremy Renner in this. Idris Elba is good despite the material he is given. I am not so much against the events playing out the way they did. I'm not against the kids escaping into a quarantine zone. That's perfectly fine. But you think you would have these people on them like a hawk immediately, since that this immediately opened up to the general, but like, you are just bringing people in for the first time after you cleared out a lot of the infected people. But guess what? There's still an entire chunk that you haven't gotten to in the city. Why are you letting people in this fucking soon to populate it? And also, why is Dawn allowed carte blanche into every fucking room in this goddamn facility? I get he's basically the janitor, but he's basically the janitor. There are certain rooms he should not be allowed into, especially given that his wife is a carrier for the goddamn infection.
Yeah, that is a huge issue.
Well, what's even dumber is that Idris Elba is the general in this movie. He literally makes every not infected person go into a tight, cramped room where there might be an infected person. Okay, you might be able to argue that that should build tension. That, oh my god, you don't know who's going to attack and get picked off one by one. If this was a better, more competently written film, I would be right there with you. But it literally just shows the zombies getting into the room and just start picking everybody off. And then eventually everybody gets out, and then the military just starts popping even innocent civilians that shouldn't have died in the first place.
By that point, I was no longer on board with A, just the military being there in general, because the second you meet them for the first time, the movie just goes downhill.
Pretty much. Actually, I'm going to bring this point up to you, Mike, and this is going to really debunk why even one person on Instagram, and I think would more than likely, I don't have TikTok, so I wouldn't know, but there was one person on Instagram reviewing 28 Years Later, calling it disappointing, but was a huge fan of Weeks. Mike, this is plot hole and bad writing errors from writers that I simply cannot forgive. Just given that it's Idris Elba too, and the fact that, well, I'm just gonna come right out and say it. Mike, what the fuck happens to his character in this movie?
He did.
No, he's not, because we see nothing. We literally just see the entire streets of bodies. We literally see the entire city basically nuked, but we never see what happens to him. He's not, like, hauled out in a helicopter. He's not attacked. It's literally just, he just vanishes from the rest of the fucking movie.
Which just kind of sucks for A, an actor I really like, but B, a character who is really underserved, like, for this story.
Yeah, it pretty much is. His character only serves a purpose to let the infected out and to start building up a body count. And I honestly think that's pretty fucking lame. And add on top of it too, just the way Rose Byrne gets wasted is just lame. She either deserved to live or deserved a more badass war veteran death than what she ended up getting in this movie.
Agreed.
So, yeah, we are, like, don't get us wrong. This, I know it sounds like I'm playing it up, that I'm just going like, OMG, angry reviewer. But it frustrates me to no end when people say that this sequel is as good, or in some cases I've seen from certain people online, some people who think this is better than one of the greatest zombie movies of all time.
I have no problem if you enjoy 28 Weeks Later. There are good elements to this. I just can't condone anyone saying it's better than Days.
It's just an inferior film that's not as well written and not as well crafted. And just given that it's in the same time frame and everything, given that Danny Boyle and Alex Garland worked on other projects together, given that Sunshine came out the same year, there's a pretty obvious reason that this movie is not as good. It doesn't have the Danny Boyle, Alex Garland team behind it to kind of guide the story.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they just signed on as executive producers, mostly for marketing.
But with that in mind, just given that obviously Danny Boyle would go on to do other movies, Alex Garland would go on to behind the scenes direct one of my all-time favorite action movies, Dread, and go on to direct a slew of other movies, even one that me and Mike are both not as crazy about, Men. They clearly both have a pedigree of delivering good quality films after 28 Days Later, so them coming back to do a sequel, I just remember back in the day, us just going, what is 28 months later gonna look like? And, well, just given that we're almost 20 years after Weeks, it makes more sense just to call it 28 years later, and I'm perfectly okay with that.
Same. I vaguely remember hearing, like, updates about 28 months later, and then just because of all the behind-the-scenes nonsense, that obviously just never came to pass. But
well, also Disney buying Fox and the rights for 28 Days Later getting bought back by the producers of the first movie. So, like, we've already hopped into the trailer. I say, how about we hop into our thoughts on 28 Years Later?
Gladly.
Just because a lot of people are very quick to call this movie a disappointment. And here's my thing that I even said to Mike off air, is that yes, this is a legacy sequel, but for all the people who constantly bitch about legacy sequels purely banking on nostalgia and just trying to cash in on nostalgia and just go, hey, remember this from the movie you already liked? Yeah, this movie does not fucking do that.
Not at all.
So to, I guess, just hop into the plot of it, just break it down for everybody. It is pretty much that Spike and Jamie are a family living on this island in, I believe yes, it's in the Scottish Highlands. They're living on this island in Scotland. They're basically Amish on this island, and the only way off of the island, which I really like this visual, and I like the way it explains how the infected were never able to reach the island, is that there is a pathway, but it only clears up if the tides in the river, if it's down. Basically, that's the only way they can actually leave the island. But once they leave it, there is no going after them. No one is coming to save you. And it pretty much could have, again, banked on the current popularity of The Last of Us, but it kind of doesn't.
Which I find so refreshing.
Yeah, I mean, you could have just picked an easy target of a father-son duo in an infected forest, just, trying to scavenge and everything. But I think this movie is smarter than that. So let's get some of the obvious things out of the way. Let's talk about the use of the iPhone as a camera in this.
Yeah, I've seen some behind the scenes pictures of the rig of all the different iPhones. It looks pretty badass.
So it is kind of continuing that idea from 28 Days Later of using current modern day technology to shoot a movie. I don't know how well it's going to age 20 years down the road from this movie, but for right now, it's an insanely well shot, good looking movie. I can completely get behind like the cinematography, like showing off the island, showing off the pathway being covered up by the river. That's all really cool. That's all visually unique. The thing that seems to get criticized, and this I don't know how it's going to age. I will kind of ding the movie a little bit for this. The use of like bullet time effects every time a zombie is killed.
I can see how people might not take to that like visual presentation, but I do got to give a shout out to the cinematographer Anthony Dodmantle, who was the DP for the first movie, so they've got the band fully back together.
I am completely down for how this movie looks. It's just the bullet time every time a zombie's killed, that kind of throws me through a bit of a loop. And thankfully, it doesn't continue throughout all of the movie. There could be a deeper meaning to it, but I don't understand a lot of the old school military and army use it, like the stock footage basically being used as soon as Aaron Taylor Johnson and his son are leaving the island. I don't fully understand the use of that old footage.
I would have to actually look into the exact meaning of all that. Although I will say, much like the trailers, the movie itself makes great use of boots.
Yeah, I was just going to say, even the way that it's not just basic promotional material to build an atmosphere, it's actually really well used in that opening scene when they're leaving the island. I think that's really awesome. The one thing I did not expect from this movie, though, was I did not expect the movie's gore to be as good and as on point as it is. I didn't, much like Nosferatu, I didn't expect for it to be as violent as it was.
Yeah, this movie is very violent when it wants to be.
Yeah, like the entire first section, which, just to cut into my feelings on this character, I love Spike in this movie. The way they make Jamie tell Spike, okay, here's how you're going to kill for the first time. You're going to aim for this big fat infected crawling on the ground, looking all gray and creepy, and they subtly crawl towards you before you know it. That builds a lot of tension and atmosphere, and it's really cool that they decided not to just have some of your basic ass infected just show up in the first 15 minutes of the movie.
It's really cool how the infected in this movie have kind of evolved into different types, almost like they've become animalistic.
Yeah, that's something that I think works really well in this movie's favor. And the kills, going back on that, just as soon as you see the arrow go through the infected's neck, it is bloody as all goddamn hell. And even when it tears it out and just bleeds out, that looked awesome. And another thing that I'm gonna hop in on, aside from just the gore, Mike, is it just me, or is Aaron Taylor Johnson really going out of his way to impress us, especially in the horror world?
Between this and Nosferatu back to back, he is legitimately becoming one of the best genre actors working today, or just actors in general.
We'll forgive him for Craven the Hunter, though.
And nobody's perfect.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I did not expect for him to be in as many good horror. Just as looking through Wikipedia right now, for him being in as many good genre films as he's been in the last couple of years, I'm completely down with like the roles he's been taking on lately and the way they develop his character throughout this movie. I love that they don't try to basically make him the Joel of the 28 Days Later universe.
Yeah, he's a lot more nuanced than you'd expect. Like, he's not perfect. He's definitely not faithful to his wife, but he is still a good dad.
Yeah, exactly. He's, in a way, he's kind of like Eminem if you think about it. He's not good to his wife, but he is good to his children. But no, the thing that I really appreciate about how they show him teaching his son how to get used to killing the infected, him bonding with Spike over killing infected, and that scene where they're in the house in the attic and it's coming down, there was so much tension, and I just sat there going, please don't have a swarm of them come in and kill them off. And I'm just going to bring up the dumb TikTok that, or Instagram reel that said that this movie was disappointing, that I fundamentally cannot agree with. The huge thing was that there was no tension in this movie. Bullshit, there was no tension. What the fuck are you talking about? The entire time that they were running back to the island, right as the alpha was chasing after them, I was like, please don't let them die. Please don't let them die. Please don't let them die.
I was thinking the exact same thing.
And also, I might as well hop into debunking dumbass points made about this movie. It not acknowledging 28 weeks later, that's bullshit. There's literally opening text that says, yeah, there was another outbreak that happened, but it was basically stopped.
Yeah.
Yeah, it basically, this entire area was blocked the fuck off, which I might as well hop into a little bit of that I know we're jumping further ahead in the movie, but one of the things I appreciate about this one that's a little bit of a callback to the first movie, Mike, remember when Cillian Murphy finds out that Celine and Hannah are basically there to be assaulted by these soldiers, and that him and the other soldier are thrown in this prison. The other soldier, you think he's just, spewing out a bunch of philosophical ramblings, and he says, no, the infection did not make it to North America. You can still see planes flying over us in the sky right now, and we've just been quarantined. I really like that they carried that over into this movie, because eventually they do introduce this one Swedish character, Eric, and he is kind of an asshole throughout his time in the movie. But to be honest, it does kind of introduce a really interesting point. Did the infection spread again like it was hinted at the end of 28 weeks later, or was it just stopped and they quarantined off the island right then and there?
I'd like to think they stopped the spread in that moment. But of course, enough time has passed that there could be some mini infections like scattered.
Or just more likely, how come nobody in the last 30 years went out of their way to try to either cure this or try to just save everybody they could who wasn't? I guess with that in mind, I kind of brought it up. So the different types of infected. I brought up the alphas, and there's no way we can talk about the alphas without some of the jokes being made about this movie online.
Yeah, unfortunately, they're packing.
Yeah, exactly. They're running around completely naked, which the thing that I've got to criticize people who are like, how come they're naked? It's completely unnecessary. You do realize that they're infected with rage. They're not going to be taking time to be like, oop, gotta wash my clothes in the river before I start to maul somebody's face off and turn them into a zombie. No. You want to know what they're going to do? They're going to run through the woods. They're not going to care if their clothes get tattered and torn. Eventually, they're going to have nothing left.
Like I said, they're animals.
Yeah, exactly. They're borderline Discovery Channel animals. In this case, they're just zombies. There is a really good bad touch by the Bloodhound Gang joke I could make, but Mike, I don't think I'm that clever.
Yeah, no. Instead, I will just call Alex Garland a nerd because one of the references, like conceiving these infected, a lot of them are pretty reminiscent of the Titans from Attack on Titan. The way they move, the way they're just like very gangly, but also intimidating.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how the alphas are. Like, as soon as you see one for the first time, Jamie literally just goes, oh my god, that is an alpha. You immediately know it's a threat as soon as it walks into frame, and you just know it's a threat. You don't want to move a muscle. As soon as you start seeing the regular infected make their move, they're just like, no, just start running. Just start running now. And I really love how that visual just establishes that they are a threat. That is awesome. And again, going back to how good that chase is to get back to the island, the fact that even just 1 or 2 arrows cannot bring these things down is terrifying.
Oh, yeah.
And the fact that these things are as tough as they are, we're already in spoiler territory. Anyway, Nick, the way they kill people, they do not maul your face off. The poster that I originally wanted to use was one of the European posters for the thumbnail where it's just the eye and it says time did not heal anything on it. In this case, I was like, well, there's no good quality photo of that poster. Why don't we use the most violent image possible used as a movie poster? This is what the alphas do, people. They will rip your literal head off of your body, Predator style, and leave the spinal cord dangling.
That is a pretty gnarly image for a poster for a mainstream blockbuster.
I don't think any movie has had a poster this violent in decades, dude.
It's just impressive how violent this movie gets, but at the same time, it's balanced by the quiet moments.
Yeah, this is one thing I forgot to bring up when talking about 28 Days Later. Even weeks, for as milquetoast as that movie is, these movies really are about families dealing with these outbreaks, with the infected.
Which is actually kind of wholesome, like, when you think about it, because I wouldn't consider these movies cynical or nihilistic in any way.
Yeah, no.
If anything, there's a hopeful attitude that's baked into the DNA that no matter how bad shit gets, you can still rely on family or even like found family, which is basically like the characters from the first movie.
Yeah, and in this case, a lot of this movie has to do once Spike and Jamie get back to the island. We haven't really talked about how good Jodie Comer is in this movie.
She is so good.
She is deranged as all hell, and I am all here for her being in this movie the way she is. I mean, to fill in some of the blanks, so obviously she's Spike's mom, but she has this mysterious illness. Nobody knows what is going on with her. So eventually it is established that she needs to go see a doctor, obviously. We get introduced to the idea of Dr. Ian Kelson. More on him later, but all we get is some descriptions that Jamie years ago went on this trip. It was one of his first hunting trips. I think it established that he was somewhere between 15 and 18, I think they establish. And then they end up coming across him, and all he can see for miles and miles is piles of dead bodies. Men, women, and children. And that all you can see is him just working with bones. All he does is wave at them. They get the fuck out of there.
That is a perfect description for what we think Kalen is going to be until we actually meet him later in the movie.
Yeah, I mean, that is just it's creepy enough as is, just seeing an ominous fire off in the distance, but to hear the story get described and only get select visuals of what's going on is really creepy and atmospheric, and that's actually pretty awesome. But eventually, Spike takes his mom and they escape the island and they start to go look for him. And that's pretty much a solid majority of this movie. I would say the last hour is dedicated to this.
Yeah.
And the thing that I really dig about this is that even though she's sick, she's not useless.
She can hold her own on this journey.
Which, the one thing, I do have a bit of a theory what I think she might have been sick with to begin with, because the thing that I found kind of bizarre is the one fat crawling infected type that I was describing to everybody earlier. Spike and his mom hold up in a church and one of them tries to attack them. And we only see the aftermath and Spike is like, what happened? I was asleep. But then we eventually cut back to what happened. His mom defended him. So my theory, I don't know how founded this is, but if we want to include some of the better bits of 28 Weeks Later, what if she was immune and the immunity was eventually starting to wear off on her and she was slowly starting to become infected, which would explain her hallucinations.
Yeah, I was going to say, that would even explain the sickness that she has.
Yeah, exactly. Just given that we don't have traditional scientists and doctors to explain it, I think that this would make the most sense. I would be able to roll with it.
Yeah.
But obviously this is where we get introduced. But eventually we get introduced to one Dr. Ian Kelson, and Ralph Fiennes, man, he is a presence in this goddamn movie. I would personally be down to watch a prequel purely about him.
Oh, same.
Just the entire idea of his character, as soon as we're introduced to him, he pretty much is the Doctor from Day of the Dead, if you think about it, just super primitive.
The second you meet him and you see him covered in what he tells you is iodine, you pretty much know immediately, oh, okay, you can trust him.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that he's able to take an alpha and just paralyze it for even a brief moment, and even also proceeds to pull a Day of the Dead and gives him a nickname instead of Bub in this case. What does he call him again, Mike? I've got the Wikipedia. Samson! That's what he calls
Samson.
him. The fact that he's calling him Samson and is like, no, just give me the severed head, Samson. Just give me the terrifying severed head with the spot. And the fact that he's so cruel to even cook his head to get rid of all the flesh. That's just brutal, man.
It's so brutal.
So this is where we end up finding out that Spike's mom has cancer. And I think the way that the visuals, I'm not entirely sure I understand what's going on. This is one of those cases where I don't call it a flaw necessarily, because honestly, I don't know where this story is going.
But I actually kind of like that. I like not knowing the road ahead.
Yeah, but it is kind of bizarre just having all of these fireflies or all of these flames just kind of passing by as soon as we know what's going to, because she just accepts the fact that she is going to die. And pretty much it's a mercy killing that they give her.
It's a very bittersweet moment because I liked her character. I didn't want to see her go, but at the same time, she was given a good death.
Well, also, how much longer could she continue running from these things?
It couldn't have been very long.
Yeah, and one of the things that I also really liked surrounding her death was just the constant theme of memento mori, that Ralph Fiennes just says, remember the phrase memento mori. You are going to die. It's not treated as something that's like, it's pro-death or like, you're gonna die, so life is meaningless. It's more just like, it's going to happen eventually, so live your life to the fullest and to the best that you possibly can.
I like how that was repeated, and the other Latin phrase, memento amoris, which is remember, you must love.
Yeah, and in this case, this wasn't I would imagine he said that for his mom's sake, just because guaranteed she probably would not want her kid to see her getting worse over time.
That actually makes a lot of sense.
But there's one thing that we kind of have to backtrack to, because it does kind of gun for, I guess it is standard for these kinds of movies. I don't know. I'm kind of feeling weird about this. Samson, the main alpha in this movie, gets an infected, pregnant, and it gives birth to a regular, normal human.
This is an interesting revelation for the story.
I mean, I could kind of roll with it in something like Angel, where there is a plot line where Angel gets one of his old girlfriends from the 1800s pregnant, and she gives birth to one of the most obnoxious characters in TV history, Connor. But this, I'm not sure how to feel about it, where I'm just sitting here going, I kind of want to roll with it and see how the other movies go. But at the same time, I also don't want it to be in the next movie where the alpha is going after the child.
Oh, yeah. When you bring that up, I'm also thinking, we can not do that.
Yeah, a lot of this movie takes some bizarre swings for... I would almost be willing to argue that it's kind of trying to do what Halloween Ends did and just swings for the fence and takes some major risks and isn't afraid to piss people off.
Which I actually appreciate more than if this was just 28 Days Later, Part 3.
Yeah, and we already got Part 2, and look how that fucking turned out.
Exactly.
With Years, there are just so many bizarre moments, but there's also moments where I go, okay, this is a really cool, subtle callback to the original movie. Like when his mom is trying to get on the train and discovers the pregnant infected giving birth. There are rats that just swarm out from underneath her feet. That's kind of a nice little callback to the tunnel scene in the first movie. Them hiding out at a gas station. That's a subtle callback to the first movie. The constant Tango advertisements when Cillian Murphy's like, hey, you got any Tango in your bag? Like, instead of Pepsi and Coke in the first movie, in this case, it's Tango, which we don't have in Canada either, just weirdly. But no, all of the callbacks to 28 Days Later is all done really subtly and tastefully. It doesn't feel like a cynical legacy sequel just looking to capitalize on how popular I would say this is the opposite case of what happened with the Strangers sequels.
Yeah, the less said about that, the better.
You know what? I'll only say one thing and we'll hop back into the better movie. The Strangers does not need sequels.
No.
But yeah, even this movie also has the nerve to do a callback to the first movie, playing the Godspeed You Black Emperor song that appears in the first 5 minutes of the first movie. You know, when Jim's getting out of the hospital and it's him like really discovering the outbreak. It plays that towards the end of this movie.
Which I certainly appreciate.
Well, we might as well just hop into the ending because even I still don't know how to feel about it. So it is playing during the ending. Eventually Spike does get the baby back to the island. I don't know how that kid managed to sneak onto the island to deliver the child.
Yeah, same. I even after seeing the movie twice, I still don't know how he managed to sneak both himself and the child.
And the fact that he also has the nerve to name the baby after his mom, that's a cute little touch. It also is kind of setting up what's going to be the next movie, because I think Aaron Taylor Johnson, you would think that he would be the more focal point of the next movie.
Yeah, I am not sure, like, exactly what's going on with the next movie. I just know, based on what they teased at the end of this one, I'm just fascinated by what Nia DaCosta is going to do with these characters.
Yeah, because this is the most bizarre ending to a major studio released film I think we've ever seen.
It is a pretty radical tone shift when these guys are introduced.
So what happens is Spike decides to go live on his own in the mainland, looking after himself and taking care of it himself. And Jamie is so livid that he's basically going to try and hunt him down, like try to get him back off of the mainland, back onto the island. And eventually you start seeing the roadway through a mountain, and it looks very similar to the one at the end of 28 Days Later, the one that all of those fighter jets are flying through. You start to think, is he running towards, oh my God, he's running towards Jim's house at the end of the first movie. And eventually you hear a hello, and it sounds an awful lot like Cillian Murphy. And I even asked you this before we started recording. I kind of went for a second, oh my God, is Jim showing up? Like, is this a surprise cameo? But then it ties it back to the beginning of the fucking movie?
Yeah, very, very interesting choice there.
So the beginning of the movie, this is shown in the trailer, so this isn't much of a spoiler, but the house attack, that is where we originally get introduced to Jimmy as a kid. That is just set during the events of 28 Days Later. And then eventually we do see him run towards his dad in this church. Some people think that this was way too over the top for its own good. It's a zombie movie. I can roll with it.
Same.
We see the infected just swarm this church, and originally, when I saw the trailer and saw that footage for the first time, I thought we were getting a flashback to the church in the first movie that Jim goes into.
I thought that same thing, like, wait, is this a scene from one of the older movies? But no, this is just the swarm coming into that church.
Yeah, exactly. So Jimmy obviously hides out. He manages to escape, not get infected. But years later, he meets up with Spike. And me and Mike came to the agreement on this that we're not going to try and analyze like some of the social commentary that this movie is trying to do, especially when it comes into regards of Brexit. I am also not as familiar, like I'm familiar that Jimmy Savile is a very notorious child abuser, but it's about as surface knowledge as you can get. But you just see this blonde, longish hair guy with bangs, and you see him and a squad that looks like him, and it looks like almost like if a Power Rangers episode was in a Grindhouse movie, and then they just start killing all the zombies in sight.
I will say this, Jack O'Connell's costume in that is pretty far out.
Yeah, I still don't know how to feel about it, man. I know I don't blame some people for laughing their ass off during this ending, but at the same time, I'm going, I kind of want to roll with it, but is he going to be a villain? Who is this guy that we've only gotten subtle, like just his backstory at the beginning of the movie? Only he is coming, and that hanging upside down zombie with the bag over its head with Jimmy carved into his stomach. Who is this guy?
That's the thing. We have no idea. And like the movie ends before we really get to know these people outside of like their big entrance.
Yeah, it's a bizarre way to end this movie, and I don't know how I really feel going into the Bone Temple, really. I don't know how they're gonna tie up the loose ends. I don't know how they're going to, I don't know where this story is going, man.
And again, that's oddly refreshing. I would rather not know what's going on and just enjoy the ride than know too much and be disappointed by like my own expectations.
Yeah, I can kind of roll with that perspective. At the same time, though, I really am sitting here going, yeah, I just don't know how to feel. But at the same time, I'm going to loop back to the point I made closer towards the beginning of this. Yeah, you can't say that this falls into the same pitfalls of other legacy sequels. It takes some bold risks, and not necessarily you have to like it, but on some level, I appreciate that it takes the risks.
Exactly.
And that at least it's still not just a technically well-made movie, but it's a well-acted movie. The characters are well written and well established, and I kind of can't wait for us to come back in January and talk about the Bone Temple.
Yeah, like the more I think about it, the more excited I'm getting at just seeing this world continue.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that this movie performed as well at the box office as it did, making its budget back over the weekend, I can roll with that, especially just given that if it means horror movies continue to generate more revenue for Hollywood and that it's reviewing well and people for the most part are liking it, I hope this encourages Hollywood to go, yeah, let's just keep bankrolling more horror movies rather than just, put out another remake of something or just another big franchise movie.
Continuing the conversation that we established in our like horror free-for-all, this golden age I do not see ending anytime soon.
No, absolutely not. And I can completely get behind it. If this is one of those movies, I even told one of my managers at work who went to go see it on Tuesday night, I am going to tell people, definitely go see it in a theater, but go judge it for yourself, but also to go in and judge it on its own merits.
Agreed. Like, I said this already, but don't go expecting a rehash of 28 Days Later, because it's not that. It is expanding upon the themes and the world building and telling a story that's I would say it's telling its own story using the inciting incident of the first movie as a springboard.
Which we brought this up off air, Mike. I don't think that they're only just going to use Cillian Murphy at the end of this next movie. I think that they are going to give him a bigger role. I just don't know what that's going to look like.
Me neither.
I'm also just sitting here going like, please, for the love of God, the devil and George Carlin's ghost, please don't kill him off.
No, they better not do that.
Yeah, the one big question I thought about this earlier this week, honestly, what are they going to say happened to Celine and Hannah?
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Because to my knowledge, or just no acknowledgement in general, period, Naomi Harris hasn't said that she's going to come back for another movie. I don't even know if she's been asked, but yeah, like, you're going to have to explain an entire near 30-year gap between movies. Like, what happened to those two after?
I would love to know, like, A, if they even survived. Chances are pretty good that they unfortunately may not have made it, but
well, there is one comic book series that came out towards the end of the 2000s where it does explain the events after 28 Days Later. Selena, she's in Norway at this point. Eventually, a journalist comes and sneaks her into Britain, but eventually they all end up getting trapped there, and they pretty much have to fend for themselves. And in one of the other I think it's explained in this comic series specifically, I could be wrong, it does say that after what Jim did to the army in the first movie, that he did eventually die, that he was executed, but which is kind of in line with the original ending they had in mind for Days, which was, Mike, you do know about the original ending for 28 Days Later, right?
Vaguely.
Yeah, that Jim dies at the end.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that one.
Yeah, and it's kind of subtly intercut at the end of 28 Days in the original movie. As soon as you see Selena pulling the part of the syringe with her teeth to give him the shot of the adrenaline, that is from the original ending.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, 28 years later, the Bone Temple. That is going to be a long, convoluted title for me. But honestly, I'm excited for it, but at the same time, I'm sitting here going, man, this has a lot of story that it's got to wrap up.
Yeah, that's probably why this became a trilogy and not just this movie being the end of the series.
Which, that's kind of my thing. I do hope that whatever the third movie ends up being, I really do hope that this is the end of the series.
Same.
But I guess with that in mind, hopping back on my main point, do we recommend this? Yes, we do. But go into this and judge it on its own merits. Go in and judge it for yourself, not based on what other people are making fun of online, like the naked infected running around and, a bunch of the bizarre editing choices. Honestly, go in and judge what you like about it for you. We recommend it, but again, just remember to form your own take on it, but don't base it on whatever you see on Instagram or TikTok or whatever social media you use.
That's honestly my general PSA when it comes to going into any movie. Go in as clean as possible from outside influence. Like if you're excited for this movie, go into this movie with as open a mind as possible.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess the only note I can think to end it on is I can't wait to come back and talk about the next movie in January.
But until then, Nick, where can everyone find you online?
Super Saiyan Death Metal God on Instagram. I mainly post album covers, movies I'm watching, video games I happen to be playing, concerts I go to, meet and greets, all of the sorts. Go shoot me a follow, shoot me some binge likes, help combat the bullshit algorithm from Meta.
And you guys can find me on various social media sites at Captain K42. You can check out my quick thoughts on letterboxd.com/CoachK42. And you can follow Renegade Pop Culture on Facebook and Blue Sky at Renegade Pop Culture. You can also find us on YouTube, on Podchaser. Consider supporting our Patreon at patreon.com/Renegade Pop Culture. You can also listen to all of our podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. And last but not least, everything can be found at renegadepopculture.com. In escape, so do we. That'll do it for this episode of Renegade Marquee. We will catch you guys later. Peace out.